friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria and this is where I talk about all of the bookish things that I love. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books of 2020. This video was so hard for me to decide. I could not choose which books were my favorites. At the time that I'm filming this, it is December 20th, I think, and I have read 272 books, which is crazy. That is the most books that I've ever read in a year, and I am so proud of myself. But it made it so much more difficult to choose which ones were my favorites. I rated a ton of books 5 stars this year, and I had such difficulty. So I tried to put them in order. I'm not 100% sure that this is the order that I'm set on, but it's what I'm choosing for this video. It is the best that I can do. So I am going to just jump right in. I'm not going to give super long descriptions of each of the books. I'm just gonna like gush a little bit about like why I loved them. But other than that, I'm just gonna start. So coming in at number 10, we have How to Love a Duke in 10 Days by Kerrigan Byrne. I knew that I wanted to have a Kerrigan Byrne on this list. I read so many of her books this year. I read all of the Victorian Rebel series and then what was out of the Devil You Know series, which is what this book is in. This is the first book in the Devil You Know series, and it is about a girl named Alexandra who, while she's away at school, gets raped by her headmaster, I think, and then she murders him, and her best friends help her bury him in the garden, and it like really bonds the three of them together. They've all had secrets, have tragic things in their past, and they all bond together over that, and they become friends throughout the rest of their lives. This book takes place years later when one of the girls, Francesca, is set to marry Piers, who is the Duke of Redmayne. So Alexandra and the other friend, whose name I can't remember, go to the Duke of Redmayne's castle where to meet Piers and see Francesca for their wedding. However, Francesca and Piers' marriage was of convenience. They aren't in love or anything, so Alex ends up marrying Piers instead of Francesca because she is being blackmailed and she needs money and Piers needs a wife, and she's like, why not me? So she and Piers get married, and she is trying to figure out who's blackmailing her, and also who's trying to kill her, or if the person that is trying to be killed is Piers. It's just like a whole mystery of who's trying to kill who's actually trying to be killed, and it is so good. So much mystery, intrigue. It's very dark. Huge serious trigger warnings because there is a rape scene in this in the beginning. As Kerrigan Byrne does in a lot of her books, she has very violent opening prologues, and this one is definitely a little jarring to go into, especially if you don't know if it's coming. So definitely check out trigger warnings for all of Kerrigan Byrne's books before you read them. But this one was my favorite because I really loved Alexandra's struggles that she went through throughout her entire life, from the rape that she had that occurred when she was younger. She is much older. She's an academic. She studied at the Sorbonne in France, and she is an archaeologist. I really like that aspect of her, that she is like really educated and very smart, and she goes, you see how much she's changed her daily aspects of her life because of what happened to her. Like, she's now in her mid-20s and she like binds her chest so that she doesn't get attention drawn to her. She doesn't wear anything flashy that people could notice her. She wants to be in the background. She wants to be unnoticed by men especially. So when she meets Piers, and he's this like scary looking man, he has a scar on his face, he's damaged in his own right, it's amazing to see them bond over the like pain that they don't even know that each other has. But it is so good. I definitely would recommend this one. I would recommend all of Kerrigan Byrne's books, but this for sure had to go on this list because it was very easy 5 stars for me. I really enjoyed this one. The next book on my list, number 9, is also historical, and that is The Secret by Julie Garwood. I loved this book. This was the first old school classic style historical that I read. This was written in the early 90s, I believe. Let me check. 92. So this one came out in 92. It's older than me. And this is the story about a girl named Judith who is English, and she has been best friends since childhood with a Scottish girl named Frances Catherine. And when they were younger, they used to meet every year at this festival in the lowlands of Scotland, and she and Frances Catherine became very quick friends. And Frances Catherine always told Judith about how scared she was to be pregnant and give birth. Frances Catherine's mother and grandmother both died in childbirth, and so she's really afraid to give birth. And so she makes Judith promise to be there when the time comes for her to be pregnant and give birth. And so now it's years later, Frances Catherine is pregnant, and Judith is gonna go up to the Highlands where Frances Catherine lives to help her give birth. And Judith spent a lot of her life learning and studying midwifery in order to be there for Frances Catherine and know like what she can and what's the best way to help her. And so Frances Catherine sends the laird of the clan that she lives in and a bunch of the other warriors to go down to England to pick up Judith and bring her back up to the Highlands. So the relationship in this one is between Judith and the laird of the clan. His name is Ian? Yeah. His name is Ian. And one of the things that I really loved about this book was the relationship between Judith and Frances Catherine. I love the strong female friendships that they have. In this one, the childhood friendship and that grows, and how Judith dedicates so much of her life to the cause of learning midwifery just to help Frances Catherine was really beautiful to read about. And then one of the other things that I loved about this was the relationship between Judith and Ian, where Judith is a sassy English woman and she is a very strong woman, and Ian is the laird of the Scottish clan. He hates England, and he is sent to go down. They even have to have like a clan meeting just to decide if they're gonna allow this English woman to come into their clan to help Frances Catherine. Frances Catherine has to like petition the clan to let Judith come in to the Highlands. So when he meets this English lady, he's like, oh, she's just gonna be this like boring English lady, but she's so sassy and she's so strong, and all the other like warriors in the clan like fall in love with her too. They like are like, oh, if you don't want her, like we'll take her, because she's awesome. And it's so good. Definitely would recommend this. I'm definitely gonna want to read more Julie Garwood's. I've read a couple this year, but this one was without a doubt my favorite that I read, so made the list. Number 7 on this list is Brooklyn Air by Serena Bowen. If you've watched any videos on my channel or seen my Instagram, you know how much I love Serena Bowen. And this was the first of hers that I read. It really actually like changed my life and introduced me to Serena Bowen because I've now read every single one of her books. So this one is always going to have a very special place in my heart. This is about Nate Kattenberger, who is the CEO of Kattenberger Tech, which is like a tech company kind of like Apple, and his relationship with his assistant, whose name is Rebecca. So Rebecca had a bit of a difficult time of it when she was a little younger. She had to drop out of college in order to get a job to help her family. She gets this job as the personal assistant to Nate before his company really makes it big. And so they've worked very closely together for years. Nate then later on, when his company has made it big, he's super rich now, he buys a hockey team called the Brooklyn Bruisers, and he ends up sending Rebecca to Brooklyn to run and manage his hockey team instead of being his personal assistant now. And Rebecca thinks this is like a demotion. She's like, why did you like banish me to Brooklyn when I thought I was a good personal assistant? So she's really confused. But one day she walks onto the ice and she slips and she hits her head and she ends up with a really horrible concussion. And she lives in a very small apartment with her younger sister, her younger sister's boyfriend, and her younger sister's baby. So it's a very small apartment, it's really cramped, and it's very loud. There's never a quiet moment because the sister has a baby, the sister's always there. She doesn't really like work. And Rebecca works to take care of all of them. Like, she is serious workaholic, and she doesn't really know how to relax. So Nate offers Rebecca his house to stay at because it's quiet there. He has a lot of empty guest rooms, and he's like, why don't you come stay at my house to relax and recover? And she struggles with this because she doesn't want to like push the boundaries of like CEO assistant relationship. She's like, they thinks they're friends, but she knows that this is also her boss, so she doesn't want anyone to think that like there's anything going on there. She doesn't want to be like the slut of the office. And it is the relationship growing from friendship to more between Nate and Rebecca, and it's really, 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 really sweet. I absolutely love this book. It is always going to be one of those like comfort reads, and I think that that's one of the reasons why it made it onto this list, is that the way that I feel when I read it is so comforting and so like happy. Like, I just smile when I read it, and I absolutely love it. All right, number 7 is From Blood and Nash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This book is very long. It's so much, and it is about a girl named Poppy who is called the Maiden, and she is not allowed to be or touched, talked to, or looked upon. And she has to wear a veil over her face, and she is not allowed to have friends. She's very sheltered. She lives in this castle where she is like protected, and all she's told is that she's important to help with the ascension of the other people in the castle. So she sneaks out one night and she goes to this place where it's like a gambling place, and she ends up kissing a man who ends up being her new bodyguard, and his name is Hawk. And it is so good. It's a fantasy romance story, and I don't know if any of you know this, but I used to be primarily a fantasy reader, because I didn't know that I liked romance. However, my favorite part of my fantasy stories that I used to read was always the romance part, and if there wasn't a romance in the fantasy, I always got really bored. So when I found romance, I was like, oh, that makes sense. I prefer romance. But fantasy romance is something that really I really still connect to, and this book is so cool. I loved Poppy and how freaking badass she is. There's this one scene where she these evil monsters, the Craven, are attacking the castle, and she sneaks up onto the roof and starts shooting them with bows and arrows. I mean, she's just so badass. It's hard to explain because it is a fantasy story, and I don't really want to give anything super important away, because there's definitely some really sneaky reveals in here, but it's really, really good. I really liked it. I thought it was so badass, and it made it onto this list. Next one, number 6, I think 6, is Sarah J. Maas's Crescent City. This is an urban fantasy story about a girl named Bryce who is part fae, and she is a super party girl. She lives it up in the city until one day her best friends are all murdered, and Bryce's entire life changes. she goes through this period of like horrible depression until one day the like higher ups in the government show up at her place of work and tell her that the person that they thought was responsible for the murder of her friends wasn't actually the killer. The kills are starting up again, and they are exactly the same as what happened to Bryce's best friends, and so they hire basically Bryce to try and figure out who the killer is, and they assign her a man named Hunt, who is a fallen angel, to who is an enslaved fallen angel. He works for the government, not by choice, to follow her around and help her with the mystery of like finding who the killer is. And I think my favorite part of this book was Bryce. She is so badass and yet so traumatized. Like, people think that she's just this like silly party girl, but she is so different than that. She's so strong, and she has so much like hidden trauma inside of her, where you can tell that she's just like totally not over the fact that her best friend, whose name was Danica, was murdered. And the relationship between Hunt and Bryce in this was just so perfect. I wanted it so much. There was so much like build up where I was just like, come on, get together, you know you want to, and I'm like clutching it. But this book is like 800 pages and I finished it in a day and a half. I mean, I couldn't put it down. And I know that a lot of people before I read this, I had heard a lot of people talk about it and say that, oh, the first half is kind of boring, but the last like 300 pages are amazing. But I didn't feel that way. I thought every page was amazing. I was so hooked from like the first chapter, and I loved it so much. So I cannot wait for the next one. It's amazing. The next book on this list, which is number 5, we're back to historicals, and that is Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. I had to put a Tessa Dare on this list. She's the author that got me into historical romance. I read my first Tessa Dare book, which was my first historical romance book, January 12th, 2020. Literally the second week of January, I read my first historical, and I have now read so many. So I knew that I wanted to put a Tessa Dare on this list, and this one is my favorite. This is part of her Castles Ever After series, and it is about a girl named Charlotte whose mother is really pushy. She's definitely like trying to like find a husband for her daughter, and so she's really like pushy about trying to get the men to be like, ooh, look at my daughter, isn't she pretty, why don't you like hang out with each other. And so Charlotte and this man whose name is Piers, who is a lord, are at a party together, and she knows that her mother is going to try and push Piers onto her. And so she goes to warn him, and she finds him in this office in the house, and she goes up to him and she says, I don't want to marry you. And he's like, what? And she's like, my mom is going to push me on you, but it's not me that wants to marry you, it's her, like, just so you know. And while they're alone in this office, this other couple comes in, and Piers and Charlotte have to hide, or else they'll get ruined because they're alone together. So this other couple starts having sex, and Piers and Charlotte are hiding, and the people somebody hears the couple having sex, and they don't see the couple leave, but they come into the room and they see Piers and Charlotte, and they think that it was Piers and Charlotte that were having sex, and so Piers and Charlotte are ruined and have to get married. And Charlotte does not want to marry him, and so she makes it her mission to try and find out who the couple was that was having sex. And it is so funny. Like, that was one thing that I absolutely loved about this book. It was just absolutely hilarious. Like, even the premise of like trying to find out who was having sex in the same room as them was just absolutely hilarious. I thought it was so fun. I really liked Piers and Charlotte's relationship. I liked the secrets that Piers had about himself. Like, Charlotte was like trying to like solve the mystery, but also at the same time trying to like solve who Piers is, and It was so, so good. Loved it so much. So good. The next one is the last historical on this list. It is my 4th favorite book of the year, and that is Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. I love this book. I have talked about this book a couple of times on my channel so far. This is about a girl named Evelyn and a guy named Graham who are from rival clans. So Evelyn Armstrong and Graham Montgomery are from the rival Montgomery and Armstrong clans. These clans hate each other and they want to go to war with each other. But the king does not want them to go to war, so he forces them to sign a treaty to be at peace. And in order to solidify this treaty, the king sets an arranged marriage between Graham, who is the laird of the Montgomery clan, and Evelyn, who is the daughter of the laird of the Armstrong clan. So they have to get married in order to solidify this peace treaty. So Graham does not want to marry Evelyn, but the thing that makes it different is that Evelyn is deaf. But nobody knows that she's deaf. She was thrown from a horse, and she ended up having brain fever, and everyone now thinks that she's crazy. She doesn't speak. She will go off in these like moments where people will like be trying to speak to her and she'll be just like staring off into nothingness, and people all think she's crazy. So Graham doesn't want to marry Evelyn. He's like, I can't ever have a real marriage with her, not to mention the fact that she's an Armstrong and I hate the Armstrongs, but like I can't ever have a real marriage with somebody because she's crazy. Like I don't want to take advantage of her. And Evelyn's parents who think she's crazy also, they're like, we don't want our daughter to be taken advantage of. And so Evelyn wants the marriage. She wants to get out from behind her family. So they get married. She goes to the Montgomery clan, and she tries her best to like fit in, but everyone hates her there. Like she's an Armstrong and everyone hates her, until Graham finds out that she's not actually crazy, she's just deaf. And they develop this really beautiful relationship, and it's so good. And one of my favorite things about this book was Graham and his fear of like doing anything wrong against Evelyn. He thinks that she's daft, so he doesn't want to do anything to harm her. He doesn't want to do anything that could possibly be like seen as taking advantage of her, and he's just so sweet. And he also, like, even though she's an Armstrong, he's understands the marriage, and he's saying, okay, she's my wife now, I'm gonna treat her like a wife should be treated, and I'm going to protect her and make sure that my clan, who hates her, learns to care for her and respect her. And it's really, really sweet, and I think that their relationship builds so nicely. It's just really, really good. The relationship is so, so sweet, and I really loved it. The number 3 book on this list is Welcome to the Dark Side by Gianna Darling. I love this book. This book is amazing. I was just blown away. So this book is about a girl named Lou, who is the daughter of the mayor. She has always known that she doesn't really fit in with her family. She feels something inside of herself that like is drawn to the darkness. And when she's 6 years old and there's this shooting in front of the church, she sees this man and she runs to him. She just like feels something in her soul that's like connecting her to this man. And so she runs towards him. And as she runs towards him, the man, who's Zeus, is being shot at by the man who's doing the shooting. So Zeus goes in front of Lou to protect her, and the bullet goes through Zeus into Lou, and then Zeus shoots the shooter and kills him. So they meet afterwards in the hospital. Zeus is a lot older. I think he's in his early 20s, and Lou is 6, and they are just, they have so much, they're very, very different people, but they have this like connection. So Zeus ends up going to prison for manslaughter, and Lou goes back home with her family, but she decides to become pen pals with Zeus while he's in prison. So throughout her whole life until she's a lot older, from 6 until like 16, she pen pals with Zeus while he's in prison, and then later after he gets out of prison, they continue their pen palness. And she talks to him about the way that you would talk to like a best friend. She writes about what's going on in her life. She writes about how the trouble she's having at school. She talks to him about the fact that she has cancer. She has leukemia, I think she has, when she's like 7 years old. And she talks to him about how scared she is and how losing her hair depresses her and all these things that that she's feeling in her life. She talks and sends letters, and he sends them back, and he makes her feel better. And her family, her parents, don't have any idea that she's writing these letters. They don't really care about her. Like, they make her go through her cancer on her own. She doesn't, they view her as a status symbol, like, oh, she has to be perfect for the people in the town because her dad is the mayor, so they just like have to put up a united front of the family and show them we're so perfect. So it's years later. Lou is 17, and she meets Zeus again in person for the first time since she's 6, and they end up having this relationship. So Lou is 17 and Zeus, I think, is 35, 36. There is a 19-year age gap, but it is just the most beautiful story and relationship, and it's so poetically written. Like, the writing style in this is so amazing, and the way that Gianna like has the relationship between a 17-year-old and a 36-year-old is so beautiful. Like, I didn't think that, like, I had never read a book with an age gap that large, and I thought it was going to make me uncomfortable, but it didn't. I mean, I really like believed the relationship and believed how much Zeus and Lou like loved each other, and it's really amazing. And I also think one of my favorite things about this book was the found family aspect. Lou does not get along with her parents. She feels so alone with her family. Sorry, I just kicked my camera. She feels so alone with her family, and she finds her place in this motorcycle club and with Zeus, and the found family aspect in the motorcycle club. They would do anything to protect each other. Their family, their brothers, and they really accept Lou into their like grasp so easily, and it's just really beautiful. It's so good. So this is why it made number 3. Number 2 is House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I read this book in September, I think, and I am still like thinking about it. I can still remember all of the details in it. I really connected and loved this book so much. So this book is about a man named Linus who is kind of stuck in a rut. All he does is work. He doesn't have any friends. He lives alone with his cat. He doesn't have a lot going on in his life. He doesn't do anything for himself. All he does is work at the Department of Magical Youth as a social worker. So his job is to go to orphanages that are magical youth orphanages and make sure that everything is being done according to the rules and regulations that the Department of Magical Youth has set forth. So one day, the extremely upper management sends him on a job where he has to go to this specific orphanage, which is housing the most dangerous magical youth. So, and then to report back to him, he has to send like these reports every week that every like couple of days that he's there back to Extreme Lumber Management to let them know if anything's going wrong or not being followed to the rules and regulations. So he gets there, and he's so like judgmental at first. Like, he doesn't even realize that he has these like inner prejudices against the magical beings that exist until he gets there and he really realizes like that they're children, and he connects and becomes such friends with the children there that he has his eyes really opened about that, like, just because the rules and regulations are what they are doesn't mean that they're actually right, and that like the world, just because something like is the way it is doesn't mean that it's the right way. And he really like has his eyes opened about like the way that the government and the Department of Magical Youth has been treating the magical beings, and how the people in the town where the orphanage is held like hate the people from the orphanage just because they're magical. Like, they think because they're different than them that they're wrong and that they're scary and that they're gonna harm them. And it's really amazing to see Linus's eyes get opened, and then how much he's changed between the beginning of the book and the end of the book. He also ends up having a relationship with the head of the orphanage, Arthur, and he becomes much closer to him, and he realizes what was really lacking in his life. Like, he never really realized how much his life had been lacking until he had more. And it's really, really beautiful, and I really liked the way that I could connect to real life with it, because when you read something like this and you're like, you're like, how could the townspeople do that? How could they be so mean to the children that are just because they're magical? And when you think about it in real life, which I'm gonna get a little political here, but when you think about it in real life and you think about like even just like LGBTQ, where it's like, oh, there are people in the world who hate gay people just because they're gay, because it's something different than them, and it makes people fear something different. And when you put it in this like magical setting, it's so much easier to see, oh, how could you be so horrible to them just because they're just children, and they're not gonna hurt you just because they're different than you. And I could really like draw parallels to like real life, and I just really loved it. I would 10 out of 10 recommend this. All right, we've gotten to the last one, my number one favorite book of this year. Did anyone guess it? It's Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. I adore this book. So this book is a childhood friends to lovers romance, male hockey sports romance between Wes and Jamie, who when they were younger used to go to this hockey camp every summer, and they were roommates and they were best friends until one day on their like last year at camp, something goes down and they end up not speaking to each other for 4 years afterwards. Wes just couldn't he felt so embarrassed by what had happened that he stopped talking to Jamie. And it's 3-4 years later, and they're seniors in college, and their college teams are competing against each other in the Frozen Four, which is the hockey championships for college. And they are reunited there when their teams play against each other. Wes, who has always been in love with Jamie, and Jamie doesn't know it, Wes sees Jamie again and realizes that he's still in love with him the same way he was when he was younger. And so he decides to go back to the hockey camp that they used to go to when they were younger, where Jamie has been coaching all the years since they stopped going there. And he decides to go back and see Jamie and coach for the summer before he has to leave for the NHL for training camp. And it is the most beautiful relationship between Wes and Jamie of like figuring out who they are and what they want to do with their lives, and what they want to be together, and if they want to be together, and how that would work. And it's it's so beautiful, and it's such a heartwarming story. Like, my heart feels so full when I read it. Like, I feel so much love for Wes and Jamie, and I see how much that they love each other, and the like struggle of if they can still be together as they're older when they have different paths, and how that they're going to like work it out, and how they discover if their relationship is even going to work out, like going from friends to like sort of like enemies to friends to lovers again. It makes it so, the progression of their relationship, you really like believe in their relationship because you really can connect to the feelings that they have for all of the years as it grows into something more. And it's just so beautiful. And I've read this book 4 times just this year. I read it for the first time this year. Earlier this year, I read it in March. And I've now read it 4 times. That's how much I love this book. And I will probably read it for a 5th time before 2020 is over. But it's just so amazing. It's so good. And the relationship and the like love that you feel towards the characters, and the love that they feel towards each other is just, I have no other words other than it's just beautiful. And I love it. And please read it, because Serena Bowen and Ella Kennedy are geniuses, because this book is amazing. But that is it. Those are my top 10 favorite books of 2020. It was so hard to choose and narrow down, but I'm really happy with the ones that I did choose. And I would recommend every single one of them. I give every single one of them 5 stars. I would probably give every single one of them a 6th star if I could. But that is it for this video. I hope you liked it. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, if you liked them as much as I did, or if you have any books that are similar that you think that I would enjoy. But other than that, that's it for this video. So thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye.